On today's show, we're breaking down the game of one of the more dynamic talents in the 2025 NHL draft class with the help of Étienne Lepage from BlueChipProspect here on Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I'm your host, Sebastian Hyde, the USHL scout over at Elite Prospects, and I'm joined with a guest today as we're breaking down the game of Justin Carbonneau, joined here by Étienne Lepage. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. I'm happy to talk about Justin Carbonneau, my boy.
Your boy is a player that you've liked all season long, a player who's been a stalwart in your top 10 rankings, and one of the more fun players to watch when he's on his game, when everything comes together. He is a true game-breaking talent, and we'll be digging into that on today's show. In the first segment, we'll be focusing on the overall profile and the individual tools. All of these are really, really strong points of his game. This is a tool-heavy player. In the second segment, we'll be exploring some of the more question marks that we have with the toolkit, how the tools combine, as well as the overall habits in all three zones. And we'll dig a little bit into consistency and energy, because those are definitely two big topics with this player. And in the final segment, we'll wrap up the show by looking ahead at the NHL draft. We'll see where we think he might end up, which teams could be interested, and what NHL players remind us of how Carbonneau approaches the game of hockey. But let's just jump straight into the show here in the first segment and kick things off with the profile, because Carbonneau is a 6'1", 192-pound right shot right winger playing in the QMJHL with Blainville-Boisbriand, and he has been on fire this season, hasn't he? He's second in league points, 89 points, tied for second in league goals with 46 goals, and just embodies dynamism when everything comes together, right?
Yeah, I really like the toolkit with that guy. Not only, like you said, he's 6'1", 190 pounds. Like he's big. He has a frame, but he doesn't always use it. So there's that part. But the toolkit, like the shot, the passing, the skating, everything is pretty good with him. Like it's just a question of consistency to see where he's gonna go and how he's gonna develop further his game. But the shot is among the best in the draft, in my opinion. Like it's not everything is good about it. I'm not sure that the one-timer, I would still say Frondel as a better one-timer, but the catch and release is really, really good. If the puck gets to his stick, it's like he can really release that puck and shoot it from anywhere. So I really
it's such a heavy and whippy release, and he needs like so little like time and space to get it off too. Like I've seen him curl and drag around an opponent's stick and just get like an absolute like whopper of a shot in on goal from an uncomfortable position. Like he doesn't need to have the puck in an optimal spot in order to get power and accuracy behind it, and that makes him very adaptable as a goal scorer, and that's certainly been the case here this season. But the playmaking, I think, almost has more like perhaps room to grow in the coming seasons. I think the goal scoring, we already see the actual shot itself is the best tool of the goal scoring. I think we'll dig into the habits a bit more later. They still need to grow a little bit more to catch up with just how good the shot is. But the playmaking is a bit different. I think that there are these flashes of just really, really great, precise passes through multiple layers. But I think, like, especially like in terms of give and go plays, like connecting with teammates to build attacks rather than making the one pass like to get like a Hail Mary primary assist. That's a bit more still a work in progress, right?
It's also like the pass are coming out of nowhere. The teammates are not always expecting a pass from where he is. It often looks like a desperation move. He doesn't always use his teammate. He tried to be the hero on the ice. He does everything, and then at the last second, he will just dash like do a pass that will go through sticks and through pads and just get to the stick of his teammate, but nobody expected it. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but there's not a lot of planning in what he does. It's very instinctual or reactive to whatever is in front of him. And sometimes, like I said, it's like a desperation. It's like, okay, I have nothing left to do, so I'm just going to dish a pass, and it works. but not always.
Absolutely. He's very much an improviser. He likes to try things out. He gets himself into trouble and out of trouble and back into trouble again. He's definitely a
All
player
the
that
time.
makes some very frustrating decisions. And I think this was my everlasting impression when I got to watch both Carbonneau and Caleb Desnoyers play each other live just a couple of weeks ago in Blainville. Was they're just complete like opposite players. With
Yeah.
Desnoyers, you have a methodical, interconnected two-way centerman, constantly aware and scanning his position, his habits. Remind me of NHL players. So many of the routes he takes to support his line mates during rushes are NHL style plays with NHL style gap management. He's just so cerebral and intelligent.
Yeah.
But with the puck on his stick, he's a very like good player rather than an exceptional one. He's not going to like
It's not
dangle
dynamic.
around defenses, right?
Mm.
And then you have Carbonneau, who's the exact opposite. Defensively,
Mhm.
sometimes feet don't move. He's not looking around. He has no idea what's behind his head at the moment. But
Yeah.
as soon as a puck comes his way, something special can happen. So very interesting to see that dynamic between the two top QM JHL draft eligibles here this season.
Yeah.
Let's move on a little bit more to the puck handling because this is again a really big strength in his game. Talk me through a little bit what makes the puck handling special with this player and what perhaps the wildest move was that you saw him pull off in the game.
Well, I don't know if I really have a wildest move because there's wild move in every
Yeah.
game that I've watched,
Yeah.
but it's it's just the way that he can just catch the puck and toe drag around every player. But that's a thing that it's a good thing. It's also a bad thing because he uses that a lot. Like he's trying to go 1-on-1 or 1-on-2 all the time instead of using his teammate to move around, right? So the he does have the hands to go through the players and he uses his hands with toe drags and all kinds of moves. And because he has soft hands and quick hands, he can catch the puck and release the puck at the same time, like in one smooth movement or around a toe drag. But it's also, like I said, he could use his teammate to move the puck around instead of always using his hands. So
Definitely a player I think that has relied too much on his handling this season in ways that will not work against NHL competition.
yeah, yeah,
And he's despite being able to stick handle in a phone booth, he doesn't have to seek out that phone booth 3 times on every single shift. And he
yeah.
often puts himself in those positions that he has to solve problems. So a lot of the flashy plays that I've seen this year could have been prevented by just smarter decisions 3 seconds earlier, where he could have found himself in more space with more time and with more support potentially too. But a lot of these things are questions that we'll dig into more in the next segment. But to kind of wrap up the first one here, let's really dig into the physicality and skating beyond
Yeah.
just the puck skills. Those are two elements that I think together worked wonderfully when his motor is engaged. When his motor
Yeah.
is engaged with his like explosiveness from a standstill, powerful stride, and just like a lot of weight that he has. He's a strong player. He's able to forecheck heavily, apply that pressure. But how often have we seen that this season?
Exactly. That's the problem is that it's not consistent when he goes on a forecheck. Sometimes if he's the F1 doesn't apply the pressure or he doesn't lock the strong side or the weak side or lock the middle. So sometimes the forecheck has just zero impact. And his physicality, like he's a big guy, 6'1", 190 something. So he's heavy. He's supposed to be strong. But personally, in the games that I've tracked a couple manual games, and he lost more like he didn't win more than 40% of his 50-50 battles, which like he's pretty old, right? He's like what is he, October or November birthday?
November 25th.
Yeah, November 25th. So he's older for the draft. He's big, he's heavy, but even when he goes into battles, he doesn't like initiate contacts or try to get other player off balance, or like he loses his battle, which he shouldn't be. And like you said, it's just a consistency at like trying to win battles or to forecheck harder, apply pressure. Sometimes he does. Sometimes there's games or shift or periods where everything goes well, and then the next period or the next shift, then he's not moving his feet and he's not doing anything. So
Reminds me a lot of like I think like overall in this draft class we have a couple very interesting cases with players with good physical foundations who leverage that in very odd ways. Like Porter Martone, for instance, will
Yeah.
explode with violent physicality, get a 10-minute misconduct, but not do the small physical details to create small little advantages. Then you have Ivan Ryabkin, who does the same thing on steroids over in the USHL, chasing hits 5 seconds after a player has given the puck away and doing very little in terms of the small physical details in tight. But with Carbonneau, I think more than anything, a bit like with Ryabkin, it's just been that he hasn't been moving his feet consistently enough. These are both
Yeah.
players that have a lot of skill, a whole lot of confidence, like a whole lot of confidence,
Yeah.
perhaps too much at this level for either of them. But who, when they don't move their feet, are not helping their teams. And when they get static, they become net negatives on the ice. And those are the games that make scouts really question the overall risk associated with these swings. But we'll be digging into that a little bit more in the next segment. But first, a quick message from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. You just realized that your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. I've been in that spot where you need the right hire like yesterday. The pressure's on, and every day without the right person is a setback. That's exactly when Indeed sponsored jobs come right in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. Now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNHL right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. All right, let's jump right back into the show here in the second segment. And in this one, we're going to be digging into the overall toolkit and habits, how the players' tools interact. So, for instance, with Carbonneau, how does his physicality and the inconsistency of that impact his goal scoring habits in tight, as well as overall how his habits influence his defensive game and which habits will need an overhaul in terms of translating his style of play to the NHL game, because I think both of us agree there's still quite a lot of details to iron out before he'll be ready for the jump to the NHL pace and competitiveness on every single shift. But let's kick things off here at first with how some of these tools interact. And I wanted to ask you about that one I teased in the intro here. How does his physicality impact the goal scoring? Because the shot is so fantastic, but
Mhm.
that physicality and the physical willingness and moving his feet, and also the scanning habits get into play here as well. How do those impact the consistency of his ability to get open in tight, in dangerous areas in either space that he finds or creates by initiating contact and pushing players out of the way a little bit?
Yeah. Well, in the offensive zone, one of the things that I like about his game is that because of his tools, because of his skating, his physicality, or his bigger body and his hands, he has the ability to get to the middle a lot. Like, he not only has a good shot, but he takes a lot of shot from the middle of the ice. Right? He's not trying to go around the perimeter and like take shot from the outside. It doesn't work in the NHL. It's not so he doesn't do it that way. So I like that. But the physicality part is like he doesn't really retrieve puck. If they put the puck behind the defenseman in the offensive zone, he doesn't have like the pace in his game, or he doesn't have the physicality to go get that puck and then bring back that puck to the slot or to the middle of the ice and do something with it. So it's not consistent. Sometimes he does it, sometimes he doesn't. But at least his offense is mostly happening in the middle of the ice when he has the puck on his stick. And I like the fact that he's really good with the puck on his stick. He's also really good with the puck off his stick. He finds the open ice, and he can, like, some there are games where he keeps his feet moving and he's like circling around. He's trying to find ways to get the open ice so he can have a catch and release in there. And there's games where he's just planting his feet in front of the net and he's staying there, and then nothing happened. So it's, like you said, it's consistency game after game. There's a lot of work to do this way, and sometimes it's a problem. It's like compete, or not necessarily compete, but consistency is something that's really hard to get better at. It's something that you usually have or you don't. And like, he's young enough that he can work on that, but it's a problem that I have when I don't see consistency in player. I have a little bit of problem with that. But
That said, he does play the role where there's the most, I guess, room for flexibility in terms of streakiness. Like we have a lot of high-end streaky goal scorers in the NHL that are
Yeah,
still very valuable to their teams. I mean, think to the Montreal Canadiens, Patrick Laine has been quite streaky this season. He's been
yeah,
playing maybe 14 minutes most games and been kind of a specialist as a power play scorer and even strength scoring option. But he's still been a very important part to the Montreal Canadiens this
yeah,
season being in that playoff run. So players like this do have a spot in lineups, and I think he could produce a whole lot in perhaps like sheltered middle six NHL minutes, a bit like Line is playing in terms of getting those first power play opportunities, but perhaps not having to match up against top six opposition night in, night out. That could be a possibility, but there's definitely room to grow with this player to become just a really potent top six scorer. And the tools are just really high end and stand out. We've had a lot of internal talks over at Elite Prospects where the name Trevor Connolly comes up in terms of comparisons of how much the dynamic skill can influence hockey games. When Carbonneau is on, every other player on the ice can fade away and they can become like pylons on the
yeah,
ice almost, where you can just weave through them and it becomes like really artistic on the ice and something wonderful to watch. But when it's not on, he tries to do that every single shift and it just doesn't work time after time after time. He can be a very stubborn player in that regard, but
mm,
overall, I think that in terms of how these tools interact, the skating, the physicality, the shot, the handling, again, when he's consistent, when he's working with his teammates rather than as a one-man solo machine, these things can layer so wonderfully in his game. Like how he's able to combine complex handling, it's like mid stride, mid crossover,
yeah,
and then a curl and release shot right from that position. Like these things he's able to just do one after another in quick succession. That is a quite special thing that we don't see all that often in the NHL draft class. And it makes Carbonneau a very special offensive talent here this season. But to talk a little bit more about the habits, I'd love to hear your perspective on his defensive impact this season because he's played on the penalty kill a decent amount
yeah.
with Blainville. Why has that been, and what's the contrast been between the PK impact and just overall even strength defending?
Uh, Personally, I don't think he's bad. I've read people were thinking that he was like a little bit all over the place, which sometimes is true. But he's also, I think he has decent positioning. Again, it's a question of consistency. Does he do it night after night? Obviously not. It's like the offense. But I like at least he's trying. No, he's not being lazy. He offense back check. And I like the like if we take his skating, I'm not the biggest fan of his acceleration, like his explosion, because like he has a wide stance right when he skates,
Yeah.
but in the defensive zone he has like that little jump where he can out of nowhere jump, lift a stick, take the puck, move the puck, and let's go on the offense. So he's very good at timing his defense. He's not always very involved in the defense, but he does some good reads. But at the end of the day, he works well. He's not a specialist, but he works well.
I fully agree, and personally, I would love to see him take advantage of the new route that's opening up for prospects in terms of moving to the NCAA to pursue his development. I think
Yeah,
he'd have a lot more to learn there than in the QMJHL in terms of the aspects of his game that need work. Like, sure, if he stays with Blainville like for the next 2 seasons to develop and refine, he's going to score a lot of points year
yeah,
after year. But what he needs to work on is a lot more on the smaller details and on the work rate and on keeping his feet moving and on being aware and scanning consistently. Like the scanning habits can fall apart quite often, especially in like third periods when he gets more
yeah,
tired. And that's where the defensive mistakes come in. It's when he just doesn't see it and didn't look for it, rather than perhaps being overly lazy, like you were saying there. But I'd be curious about like how do you think playing college hockey would change his approach to hockey to the game? He'd still be a dynamic force, obviously, and we've seen this with Trevor Connolly this season as well at Providence College. But there's been an adjustment period for Connolly. It hasn't been the most easy
yeah.
step, and those extra demands of the college game, especially in a program like Providence, which is very focused on defending and putting in work. It's
Mhm.
been a bit more difficult. But do you think Carbonneau is going to have those same, I guess, hurdles while making a jump towards college hockey if he does indeed choose to go that route? But I think whoever drafts him will very much want to shepherd him in that direction.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an adjustment for sure. It's and again, it comes back to the consistency, or when like you said, when he gets tired towards the third period, it gets a little bit more complicated, doesn't scan the ice as much. And in the NCAA, you play against players that can go up to like 24 years old or something around that.
Yeah.
So it's a different ball game.
But less games.
Yeah, less game, more time in the gym,
Yeah.
a little bit more of a pro style too. It's not
Yeah.
like the junior is still just junior, especially the QMJHL and the WHL. They're very junior style, but I think it's the ideal jump for him. Like it's going to be a good thing for him to go from the QMJHL
Yeah.
to the NCAA and work on like the details of his game. But I think it's not necessarily going to be easy. Like it's going to take some time for him to adapt and to find a way to use his tools to actually do the same thing that he's doing in the QMJHL in the NCAA. But overall, in the long run, it's what's going to help his game the most.
And how long do you think he's going to need before he's ready to like at least compete for a spot out of camp for an NHL lineup? Like, is it 3
I,
years, 4 years?
I give him 2 years, a bit like Michael Hage.
Okay.
Like that's approximately the way I see it, because, like I said, he's a little bit on the older side.
Yeah.
Physically, he's not necessarily the strongest, but he's already big. Like
He's
he
built
has the
out.
frame, so more time in the gym in the NCAA,
Yeah.
less time on the ice, work on the strength, worked on the details. I think 2 years, but it might be possible a 3 year too. But I think 2 years he could start competing, sign his contract, go in the AHL, maybe a third year. But
Mm.
I think I like Michael H. Yeah, something like that.
That sounds good, but we'll be digging in a little bit more into what we see for this player moving forward, where we think he'll be drafted, what NHL player comps we've been able to come up with, because we both have, I think, a love-hate relationship with player comps, so that'll be fun to explore a little bit,
Yeah.
and a lot more in the final segment. But first, a quick message from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. If you're like me, your mornings need to start with a cup of coffee. But I got tired of settling for my grocery store brands that just weren't cutting it. That's why I turned to Trade. And let me tell you, this coffee is next level. Trade is the #1 specialty coffee marketplace in the US, bringing you fresh coffee from over 50 of the country's top roasters. Their experts have taste tested thousands of coffees, curating over 450 amazing roasts. Whether you're new to coffee or know exactly what you want, they'll handpick the perfect match for you. I took their quick quiz, and in just under a minute, they matched me with a roast that was fresh, smelled incredible, and tasted even better. My first bag was a game changer. It had such a smooth, rich flavor, and I could actually taste the difference from my normal coffee. And if you don't love your first bag, no worries. Trade will replace it for free until they get it just right. Right now, Trade is exclusively offering our listeners 40% off your first order at drinktrade.com/lockedonnhl. That's drinktrade.com/lockedonnhl for 40% off your first order. All righty, let's wrap up the show here in the final segment here with Etienne, where we'll be looking ahead to where we think Carbonneau will be drafted, what NHL team would be a good fit, and a whole lot more. And let's start off with that first thing. Where should he fall on draft day? Because I think that you can make reasonable arguments for him to go as high as 6th overall or as low as 25th, right? There's a
Yeah.
large range where I think there are very reasonable arguments to be made, but probably the safest bet's going to be in the teens here, right?
Yeah, I think so. Like Michael Hage went 19, not Michael Hage, sorry. Trevor Connolly, he went 19th, right? Or something like that. Like you said, it's a bit the same type of skill set. Obviously, he was much thinner, not as strong. So he went maybe a little bit later, but the draft was also deeper last year than this year. So I think somewhere like around from 15 to 25 or something like that. I think that's his range, because he does have the toolkit to become something good in the NHL, but there's a lot of work to do for him to get there. So it's still a risk. It's not like it's gonna happen. You have to work for him to get there. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I would agree with that. I do think there's a possibility of him going perhaps a little bit higher because, as you mentioned, it's not the deepest of draft classes. And in terms of top line upside, like with Carbonneau, maybe a 15 to 20% chance that he can hit a top line NHL upside, but that potential is there. Like the skill is there. He could make it that far, but a lot would have to break in his direction, I think, to be a first liner on a real like contending team. But still having that potential could make a team drafting in that like 10 to 13 range a little bit interested, especially a team like the Utah Hockey Club is in that range. The New York Rangers, I think maybe if you're already contender, why not just go for a guy that has big time upside when you're picking that high in the first round, unlike every other year.
Or
But
even a team that have 2 picks
exactly,
in the mid teens, like you
absolutely,
use your first one on the more secure one and the second one on the hit one or
like
whatever.
like the Montreal Canadiens, for
Yeah,
example,
maybe,
back-to-back picks.
who knows?
Maybe, who knows, the homegrown talent. I mean, I'm sure the Habs have watched a lot of Carbonneau this season as he is playing for the nearest junior hockey team to the Bell Center.
Oh,
They're
Bobrov was there at the Moncton Blainville game. So
unsurprised by that. That makes sense. I mean, I could see the Habs also really, really, really liking Caleb Desnoyers. I
yeah,
think if the Habs were to trade up for somebody on draft day, that would most likely be the target in terms of just stabilizing the 2C projection
yeah,
long term. And
physical.
homegrown plays the style of play that has been wanting to build in terms of culture, in terms of work rate, intelligence, just everything screams Habs of how he plays the game. That would most likely be a target for the Habs moving up, but this is going to be a wacky draft class.
Yeah,
Desnoyers might end up being drafted 3rd overall long before the Habs can make a trade. Who knows what's going to happen? There's a
gonna
lot to
be hard
throw.
for them to move up to there. So,
And it's not going to be easy. I mean, like,
yeah,
if you think the Nashville Predators and Barry Trotz are going to be giving up that 3rd overall pick very easily, I think you have to second guess it a little bit.
no.
No, they're hanging on. But beyond that, let's talk a little bit more about the overall upside and floor that we see with this player, because I think, as we've been insinuating all episode, it's kind of that high floor but low ceiling kind of high ceiling, low floor kind of player.
Yeah,
Big time potential, but not real guarantee, because I definitely see a possibility where Carbonneau ends up being like your Charlotte Udon level AHL scorer who scores a load of goals in
oh,
the
yeah.
AHL, but making that step to the NHL with that extra half second of time that they just lack
Mm.
when you make that step, and that being the final hurdle. I could see that being a possibility with Carbonneau as like the floor, but in terms of upside, like top 6 score, how many
Yeah.
points could you envision?
But I think he's a guy that could reach something like 30 goals at like in the best projection possible, playing on a second line, first power play or something
Yeah.
like that. He can reach something like a 30 goal, more goals than assists, I think, because his passes are a little not like they're not planned enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, he has that kind of projection to play on a second line. But we say second line, but it could be a first line if that's the way they want it to be. It's just the upside is probably second line, but the floor,
Maybe matching up against second lines at least. Like maybe being on
yeah,
a top line that gets the easier matchups.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think
You
I
don't
think
want him
matching
taking on
against
like
a
a
first
Connor
line is going to
McDavid
be a
every
little
night.
more is going to be more complicated.
Yeah.
But the floor, like you say, like a Charles Ludon or a AHL, like AHL player. uh, I don't really see it that way. I think he has too many tools, too much
Mm.
skills to end up there. Like nothing is impossible, right?
Yeah.
But I I don't see it that way. I think in the worst case scenario, he's gonna be a third line secondary scorer who
Okay.
you you put a player who can pass the puck and he's just gonna get the puck on his stick and he's gonna score. I think he has enough hockey sense, enough tools, enough speed, enough shot, enough everything to get there at the
Mhm.
minimum. It's just does he make the extra step to be
Mhm.
a top 6 player? That's more my question. But I
Yeah.
wouldn't really see him as a player that can top off as a AHL player,
Okay.
but nothing's
Yeah.
impossible. So
It's always risk associated with prospects. I think
yeah,
like with Galvino especially, the only live viewing I got this season was against Moncton. And I don't think that was the most flattering of games of his this
Mhm.
season. He definitely had a lot of shifts that were a bit off. So I got a little bit of the heebie-jeebies after that game, where I was like, I don't know if I'd take a swing on this player in the first round if I were a GM. But Dinwiddie definitely quelled any questions I had going into that game.
yeah,
He was fantastic. But overall, I think a wonderful draft season for the QMJHL, right? Like so much
Yeah.
talent coming out. Next year looks great as well. I mean, we have Xavier Villeneuve as well from Blainville-Boisbriand, who we talked a little bit about off camera, who
Yeah.
reminds us both a bit of Lane Hudson in terms of that agility, that undersized dynamic defenseman
The way
profile.
he moves, yeah.
The way he moves. Yeah, there's a lot of fun players coming out of the queue. And all of a sudden, the QMJHL is producing multiple first rounders again. This is lovely to
Yeah.
see.
So it's a good thing. And it's
Yeah.
fun to watch. I live close to Blainville, so I just can go there and enjoy the show. So like we were talking about, if he goes to the NCAA, it's good for him, but I'll be a little sad
Of course.
because
Yeah.
then I won't have him to watch. But
Yeah.
it is what it is, huh?
It is what it is. And last but not least, let's do the player comp here for Justin Carbonneau. And player comps are always complicated because none are perfect. Some are overused. We're not going to be using the Patrice Bergeron one here today, so no worries there for those who hear the Bergeron comps way too often here in the prospect space. Because also Carbonneau, I think, has very little in common with Bergeron, unlike his father. Very different kind of player. But a couple names came to mind. The one that you brought up, I thought was very interesting from a certain Vancouver Canucks goal scorer, right?
Yeah, I think he plays a little bit like Brock Besser. Brock Besser is a player, like, obviously he has more skating than Brock Besser, but the hands, the skills, the shot, I think it kind of fits, because that's basically what Carbonneau is going to be at the NHL level. Is going to be the shooter, the trigger man, right? He's not going to be the distributor, the mind behind the offensive play. That's not going to be him. So I really see him a bit like that, a guy that can reach his 30 goal, or if everything goes well, obviously, and play a bit like a Brock Besser.
I think like a player that is interesting to bring up because there's definitely some differences in how they approach the game. But in terms of this season of players who have maybe outperformed their expectations, a player who came to mind for me was Rickard Rakell with the Pittsburgh Penguins in terms
Yeah,
of being a really good complementary goal scorer. I mean, Rakell is up to 32 goals and 63 points in 73 games this season. Excellent production while kind of playing that like role alongside the Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin. I mean, we've had how many generations of really good wingers play alongside them whose point tallies have exploded because of it. But I think with how Rakell plays in terms of his middle drive, I see some comparisons with Carbonneau because even though he doesn't always move his feet, he does aim to end his routes in the middle of the ice at the
yeah.
net front with the stick on the ice. And I think with Rakell, in terms of those underlying habits, while also being more potent as a goal scorer than a playmaker, but still being able to get some assists here and there in give and go sequences, I see some similarities. But overall, I think that this is not the easiest player in this draft class to make a comp
It's
for,
not
right?
perfect. It's
No.
no, it's not perfect. That's for sure.
Absolutely. But overall, I think a player with just a bunch of upside, a very interesting case this season, where I think everyone has a different stance on this player. I don't think I've talked to two scouts who have the exact same opinion because there's just so much range of possible outcomes with his development. But I'll be very curious to see where he ends up going on draft day because I think a lot will depend on which team drafts him. If he gets to a team that is able to give him patience, but also a lot of hands-on like work, I think he will develop very nicely. If he's expected to figure out things on his own, he might struggle quite a bit more. But overall, very fun player. So thank you so much for joining me here, Etienne. It was
You're
lovely
welcome.
having you onto the podcast. And please let the people know where they can find your work and what you're up to this season.
Well, I'm on YouTube. I am the host behind the Blue Chip Prospect, the channel on YouTube where I talk about prospect and do all kinds of rankings and stuff like that. And that's basically it. I don't do anything else. So it's just that on YouTube, Blue Chip Prospect. I talk
It'll be
about
linked
prospect
below.
and huh?
I will link it in the description down below so people can just
Okay,
click it.
cool. Thank you.
For sure, for sure. Well, and then to everyone listening in, thank you so much for tuning in here as always on today's show. If you're watching on YouTube, please leave a comment down below what your thoughts are on the show. And if you've watched Carbonneau, what are your thoughts on this player? Do you have the same feelings of both frustration and awe with what you see of him on the ice? And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please do make sure to make us your first listen of the day. But that wraps things up here for us today. I'm your host, Sebastian Hyde, joined by Étienne Lepage, and I hope to catch you tuning in again very, very soon.